to order at 5:05. In accordance with Massachusetts law, we are conducting this meeting online. The meeting is being recorded. Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here. We have a full agenda. I will let you know that before we start that because of the agenda being very full, there is a possibility that one of the items, a presentation on U and T visas, be postponed for the March meeting. Commissioner Paredes is in charge of this presentation. And so if we don't have enough time for it to be done very carefully, we will move it to the next meeting, the meeting of March. And with that, I would like to, I need a motion to approve the agenda for today.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay, any second?
I will second that motion.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, please vote. All in favor? Raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And no abstention. The agenda is approved unanimously. Let's go for the meeting minutes of December. I need a motion to approve.
I motion to approve.
I need a second.
I second.
Thank you very much. Everybody in favor, please raise your hand, commissioners. Anybody opposed? Any abstentions?
I'm abstaining because I was not at the meeting.
Very well. The minutes are approved with one abstention of Commissioner Rousseau, who was not present at the meeting. We're gonna move now to the reports. First, we will have the executive director report, and my report will be limited to the presentation of our research team today. Director Susie Helmy, please.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm really excited to hear from our guest speakers and so honored to have them here. So I'm going to keep my report relatively short. If you have any questions, make sure to interject because I'm just going to run through the whole thing. First and foremost, we do have our social media presence now. So we do have an Instagram, a Twitter, and a newsletter. You can find the links to all of it on our website, which I will put in the chat. Also located on our website is an updated dashboard that we have. I believe in the last meeting I had talked about the dashboard not really being visually appealing and the map of the intakes not working very well. So now that we have a combined intake form, just one intake form, it allows still for the option of an anonymity, and it is translated in 11 languages. Now the dashboard has the option to separate the intakes by neighborhood. So anyone who's filling out the intake doesn't put an address, has to click the neighborhood, which allows for an easier dashboard visual for a map. So the updated dashboard is up and live on our website. I did want you all to know, because I had stated it in the previous meeting, that we're working on a resource guide and a how-to guide. So I'm calling it a Respond to Hate Toolkit, which kind of outlines what is a hate crime, what's a hate incident, what's a discrimination claim, the Massachusetts laws that protects an individuals. Both of these documents have been drafted and finalized. I'm only waiting for them to be translated into the top 10 languages because I want to make sure that all of our information is accessible. So once that's updated and translated, they're going to go up on the website, but those have been finalized. But of course, the resource guide is a working document. So anytime we find a new resource, we're going to update the resource guide. So our education outreach manager, Denise, who you met 2 meetings ago, I believe, she is currently in San Francisco. She is attending the Creating Change 2023 conference. This conference is hosted by the National LGBTQ Task Force. They talk strategy, leadership, and skills building in regards to the barriers that the LGBTQ+ community faces in housing and human rights and employment and all of those intersections. So she would be representing representing the Human Rights Commission there. This conference is going to be from the 17th to the 21st of now, like this month. She's there now. So this is starting to be in the works, but I wanted to let you all know as commissioners that the Human Rights Commission will be joining a interdepartmental coalition that the city is going to put together towards public art related vandalism. This is the public art, well, I will say that it's becoming now a trend for specifically the utility boxes that are painted to be vandalized with either racial slurs or hate speech. So it's becoming a little bit more prominent, and the city is putting together an interdepartmental coalition to talk strategy, prevention, and I of course will be representing the Human Rights Commission there in this meeting. It hasn't been set yet, but it's in the works. 2-hour anti-hate workshops that I know mentioned like 17 times already. I am trying to locate a local organization or any organization that has a generic Know Your Rights training. And the reason I say that is a lot of the organizations that I have been reaching out to, Denise and I have been meeting with, either do not have the staff capacity to either put one together or do the training, or only has trainings targeted towards a specific community, like Know Your Rights for the LGBTQ community. So I am looking for a kind of overview generic one. So I'm asking all commissioners or anyone in the chat even to email me or reach out to me with any suggestions so I can make that connection so we can get this off the ground. So I'm asking for some help there, just to help get that going.
Quick question. What sort of training are you thinking about? Just because immediately what I thought was, right, the training that Lawyers for Civil Rights did with Counselor Ruth Z, several weeks back. And so wondering if that's an option of reaching out to them.
I have not reached out to them, but that's exactly the type of training I'm thinking of, kind of like what are the protected classes, what are the laws that can prevent you, along with some resources that can help individuals, because this is the training that I think I will start within City Hall first, just to get feedback and see how that works, and then start to do externally. And then in the places I've mentioned in the past, like senior centers, veteran centers, marginalized communities that normally don't get this type of knowledge or training. But that's the type of training I'm looking for. I'm definitely gonna reach out to them because I forgot about that. So I appreciate that. But that's what I'm asking for, just assistance on that part. Oh, going back to the arts piece, Denise and I are working with the arts department here at the city Again, this is still in the works, but we're in preliminary discussion about putting a call out to Boston artists to have them do what does human rights mean to you? And then we're just trying to figure out the logistics of, are we going to make this a digital arts campaign or one that we could possibly get up in Boston City Hall, or maybe the libraries across the Boston. So, but I think that this is a really nice way of just even hearing from the residents, like what they believe human rights are and what that means to them themselves. So I just wanted to flag that for you all. The last thing I will say is that Chairwoman and I had met with U.S. Attorney Rachel Rollins' office. And one of the things that came out of that meeting was we have now a partnership with them. So when I say partnership, I mean that just like the one we have with the Boston Civil Rights Unit, where if they get an intake that doesn't amount to that of a crime, or the individual doesn't want to pursue the matter through court, they'll refer it to us, and we can do the same to them when we get an intake that arises to that of a crime. The partnership with the U.S. Attorney's Office will be specifically with her End Hate Now hotline. So if they get any of the intakes that happen in Boston, that we could maybe help the individual with resources, or for those individuals that don't need help or want to do it anonymously, they will still share that data so that we can keep track of it, since we're Boston specific and they're all of Massachusetts, just so we can further our data collection. So we'll add that to our intake. That is all I had. Does anyone have any questions or anything?
Commissioner McEachern is.
Oops, sorry. Oh, Commissioner Russo.
The call to artists, we're going to be looking for artists to present artwork and then display it publicly.
Yes.
Is that okay? Just want to clarify.
Yeah, and then it's just again to funds too, because I'm not really sure how much this is going to be. Is it going to be just a digital social media arts when we pick the artists, or can we get a couple of them to do a painting here at City Hall? Or is it enough that we can have them done at different public libraries or BCYF centers? But that's the thought process behind it.
And it will be curated somehow, so
100%.
So that things are appropriate.
Absolutely. Yeah, the Arts Department here has a whole process that I'm still learning. If there's no other questions, I think I'm just going to turn it over to you, Chairwoman.
Okay, thank you very much, Executive Director Helmy, for all the work that you and staff do in the office. And it is picking up and it's making a difference. I know it takes long. It requires a lot of patience, a lot of phone calls, an enormous number of meetings, and but it is picking up, and I'm very happy with it. Okay, let me present our guests and do my report at the same time. According to the Southern Poverty Law Center and the Anti-Defamation League, last year, the city of Boston was targeted by white supremacist groups 32 times. The previous year, 37 times. However, there were no targeted events by white supremacist groups in Boston in 2005, in 2010, or in 2014. politically motivated hate exploded in Boston, it seems, between 2016 and 2020. Last year, white supremacist actions in Boston included propaganda, harassment, vandalism, altercations, and assaults. The targets of their actions were hospitals, libraries, community centers, public art, elected officials, houses of prayer, groups, individuals, and entire communities. The groups involved were the Patriot Front, Revolt Through Tradition, the Nationalist Social Club, which is a Massachusetts-born hate group, and the Bay State Active Club, not hate club, but a Nazi organization. Their actions sought to recruit new members in the city, intimidate and frighten residents and institutions, and disrupt democratic processes. So it stands to reason that Boston's residents, civic associations, researchers, community leaders, and elected officials sounded the alarm, and also that they come together to confront this challenge with a three-pronged strategy, one that considers prediction, preparation, and prevention. The Boston Human Rights Commission is committed to this task. In addition to carrying on and sharing our own research and outreach activities, this commission will be reaching out to others in our community who have advanced tools to shed light or some light into the darkness of our times. Our guest tonight is a research group from UMass Boston, the Conflict Early Warning Analytics Program, CEWAP. I welcome them and I thank them for the generosity. After the presentation, the floor will be open for questions, first from the commissioners and commission staff, and then from the public. And as I said before, if we run out of time, Commissioner Paredes has offered to postpone his presentation to the March meeting if needed. And with that, I pass it to Mads.
Hi, folks. My name is Mads Palihapitiya. Can you all hear me? Great. So I represent the Conflict Early Warning Analytics Program at UMass Boston. And we've been monitoring political violence and hate crimes. This work started in 2020 when we were observing an increasing threat of white supremacy, domestic terrorism, political violence, and all that kind of threatening the 2020 presidential elections. And we created a national infrastructure called the Trust Network, which is a national, the first US early warning system with multiple peace building groups with international domestic experience, all the way down to community mediation centers working in communities on bystander intervention, prevention, etc. This team that you're about to meet, the Conflict Early Warning Analytics Program, is really the analytical hub of the early warning system, the Trust Network early warning system. Me personally, I've got 21 years of experience in this field. But what I want to show you is a growing concern today that we want to raise, so that we can at least have a conversation on how to approach this, is an increasing level of activities, particularly in the Massachusetts Northeastern region. As you can see, this is data from the Anti-Defamation League. And we have what we actually call this a, I can show this other map as well, sort of a corridor of hate along the eastern shoreline, ending in Boston in particular, as the heat map indicates, as well as along the sort of the northern shoreline, if call it that, through Chicago, Detroit, etc., with the Buffalo shooting last year included. And we're observing activities of various groups, including Jane's Revenge, Patriot Front, NSC 131, which, as the commissioner said, is a domestically or Massachusetts-born hate group. And we are also seeing various attempts in the US and elsewhere to try and tackle this crisis. And the reason why we're here today presenting is because we definitely see a connection between hate crimes, hate groups, and domestic terrorism. As we've already realized earlier in the month, the connection between Atomwaffen, which is an international terrorist group, a right-wing extremist group, and the threat to the electricity grid. So we want to raise this through data and have a conversation about prevention and present to you some of our findings and recommendations. So with that, I'm gonna ask my analysts to start, starting with Kelsey.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thank you so much for having us here tonight. My name is Kelsey Edmond, and I'm a doctoral candidate of public policy at UMass Boston and an analyst on the Conflict Early Warning Analytics and Policy Project team. And I'm just going to briefly touch on the topic of hate crime data or lack thereof and some things that can be done about it moving forward. So last spring, our team triangulated 4 different data sets from these organizations that you see here to understand where in the country the most amount of hate crimes are occurring. And I can't get into specifics, unfortunately, but Boston does rise to the top on one of those lists, specifically the FBI hate crime data. So the team is happy to answer any questions about this hotspot list after our presentation, but I just wanted to quickly bolster what Professor Reyes was saying and highlight the data that illustrates that these hate crimes are happening in our city. So that brings me to my next point. I'm sure many of you are aware of the recent changes that the FBI implemented when it comes to hate crime reporting. In 2021, the FBI switched reporting systems and many jurisdictions were unable to migrate their data reporting over to the new system. And this resulted in missing data from over 7,000 police agencies across the country, among those being 2 huge cities, Los Angeles and New York City. So this map here on the right-hand side shows that shows the percentage of the population that is covered by reporting via this new system. And as you can see, those numbers are extremely low for some of the most populated states in the country. And these missing pockets of data are occurring on such a large scale because hate crime reporting is voluntary at the state, local, and tribal law enforcement levels. So our team is working on ways that we can engage the role of civil society to try to fill in some of these reporting gaps. Some communities have taken it upon themselves to create their own reporting tools, such as a mobile app that can instantaneously and anonymously connect citizens to law enforcement where they can confidentially report a crime. So I just included one example of an app that's from Somerset, New Jersey. And then there are other community-wide campaigns such as the Safe Spaces program. In this program, businesses or organizations can register as an official safe space and they will receive a decal to put in their window. And that signals to anyone who is a victim of a hate crime that they can seek refuge in that business and wait for police assistance. And lastly, these initiatives don't really work without proper training and education of community leaders because hate crimes can look differently in different regions. So ensuring that local leaders can identify hate crimes and understand the many barriers that people might face in reporting them. This can ensure that hate crimes are being dealt with accordingly. So it does sound like the resource guide that's being developed is a great first step in that direction. So I'm going to turn it over now to my colleague, Maddie, who will discuss our events data analysis.
Thank you, Kelsey. And thanks the Human Rights Commission for inviting us to talk in this event. My name is Mahdi Hassan. I'm a doctoral candidate at the UMass Boston, and I work as a CUOP analyst. At CUOP, we basically, my work centers around the event data analysis, and we basically follow 2 tracks. One of them is the tracking the hate events across the United States. And the other one is our own approach, how we analyze hate events. But today I will talk briefly about tracking the hate events, and I will try to focus on Boston City, especially. So as Kelsey mentioned, that the contradictory to the popular belief that Boston is a liberal city, and because of its being diverse populations in it. It came out as one of the top hotspot cities in our hate events list. So we got curious about the city and tried to see what's happening in here. So as you see from this graph, that there have been explosion of hate events in Boston over the years. Especially up to 2015 and 2016, the hate events were kind of like sporadic and not organized by any known group. Rather, they were unknown actors individually doing some events at some places. But from 2016, 2017, and up until now, those events started to come under some types of organizations. Even though we reported about the Patriot Front and NFC, which is, by the way, was formulated in Chelsea City to begin with, not in Massachusetts, but in Chelsea City, just next to Boston. Now, as you can see, aside from Patriot Front and NFC, there are other groups that are active, especially the Bay State Active Club, as the chairwoman mentioned a little bit earlier, Revolve Through Traditions, the Bays, Identity, Abroba, and so and so. Now, you may be asking, well, organizing events, irrespective of whether they are hate events or something else, it might be a constitutional rights to organize some types of events. Well, what is there to be alarmed about? Well, that may be right, but we checked into the FBI hate crime data to see whether hate events actually translate into actual hate crime taking place in Boston City. And as you can see from this graph is that FBI hate crime data is, it is clear that it actually did. Corresponding to the rise in hate events in Boston, the hate crimes has also went up in the city. However, I would like to mention one thing, taking on Kelsey's point, is that the graph suggests that there is a decrease of hate crime from 2020 through 2022. This is rather contradictory to what we see in the distribution of hate events happening in the city. We believe there is some disconnect in how the data is reported and how the events are recorded. We further need to look into it. This is another graph looking into the whole Massachusetts. So it's going beyond Boston City. We're also looking into the whole Massachusetts, and it tells the same story of the explosion of hate events and hate crimes across the state. Having said that, at CUAP, aside from looking at the data to identify the trends, we also try to understand why the trends changes. And for this, we dig into the narratives, organizational structure, motivation that these groups uses to recruit and mobilize their members. And I would rather hand it over to our colleagues, Jack Sherman, to talk about it.
Hi guys, I'm Jack Sherman. I'm a research fellow here with CWAP, and what I do, I basically just scour the internet and wherever I could find literature or information that's relevant to what we do. And in studying a lot of these groups, one of the most common things that I found is this this idea of the Great Replacement Theory. Just to give a brief synopsis, the Great Replacement Theory falsely insinuates that there is a conspiracy theory by some shadowy, powerful group of evil people to replace Native white Americans and Europeans with non-white people from the Third World. I mean, of course, it's not based in reality or any kind of it's not based in reality or any kind of common sense, but it has garnered a lot more garnered a lot of attention in recent years. Some attacks, mass shooters who targeted a couple of mosques in Christchurch, New Zealand, a Walmart in El Paso, Texas, and just last year, a supermarket in Buffalo, New York, all expressed either complete belief in this theory or a degree of belief in it. The methods of attacks these groups use, you can see here, this is a picture of the group Patriot Front interacting with a counter protester last year on the 4th of July. These include, physical violent confrontations, shouting at people, showing up in their gear or equipment to intimidate them. A lot of the times they'll open carry powerful guns such as AR-15s, or if it doesn't even have to be physical or in person, they'll harass these people on the internet, dox them, post their personal addresses or other personal information. And so they do use a variety of tactics as part of their methods. For fundraising, a lot of these groups will fundraise over the internet. They'll use crowdfunding sources like GoFundMe, but they've also used the website GiveSendGo. GiveSendGo is a very explicitly Christian and conservative GoFundMe type crowdfunding website. It was first used by the legal defense of Kyle Rittenhouse, the young man who was involved in shootings in Kenosha, Wisconsin, during the unrest there in the summer of 2020. It garnered attention again last year when it was used to support the people organizing the trucker convoy in Canada protests. And a lot of these groups, such as the Proud Boys, Patriot Front, and others, have solicited donations on GiveSendGo for gear, equipment, and also transportation for their methods of protest.
And this GiveSendGo was actually registered here in Massachusetts, or was created by someone from here in Massachusetts.
Right. As far as emerging threats, I know someone briefly touched on this earlier. One of the groups we're monitoring is NSC 131, or Nationalist Socialist Club 131. They are a very explicitly neo-Nazi and white supremacist group that's based right here in Massachusetts. They operate across New England and Rhode Island and New Hampshire and some other places, and they've been involved in a lot of high profile disturbances. They protested outside drag and LGBT events. They often show up wearing masks and carrying rifles. They were documented at the St. Patrick's Day parade in South Boston last year with a banner, "Keep Boston Irish." And so they, among many other groups, are kinds of people that we would want to keep an eye on. I don't think this is my it's
No,
it's
this
okay.
is Christina, over to
Okay.
you.
Thank you, Matt. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having us. My name is Christina. I'm a Fulbright graduate student at the Department of Conflict Resolution, UMass Boston, and I'm affiliated as an analyst with the CyWAP team. My role in the team and in the project is to research, do a little bit more research about the role of the police, especially community policing officers, and what the police can do to increase community engagement and halting hate crimes and especially cyber hate speech. So I will briefly elaborate on the challenges and provide some examples and reasons for why hate crime and hate speech happens, and also some key recommendations that we think should be implemented, especially in the city of Boston. In the last couple of years, one of the biggest challenges that in the last couple of years, especially in Massachusetts, there has been a rise of hate crime incidents, including cyber hate speech. And as my colleague Kelsey elaborated at the very beginning of the presentation, despite the considerable efforts of the FBI Boston to increase public awareness of hate crimes, yet this issue continues to rapidly increase in Massachusetts, and there has been a jump of 31% of hate crimes noticed in 2022. For example, ever since 2020, anti-Jewish hate crimes rose from 42 incidents to 58 in 2021. Anti-Asian hate crimes rose from 2020 to 29 in 2021, and anti-LGBTQI+ rose from 61 to 74. And as Erline Isakson, the co-chair of the Massachusetts Gay and Lesbian Political Caucus, stated, it's not that hate is new, it's that there's a greater comfort now to show it, to express it, and not hide it. the reasons behind this hate crime and cyber hate speech incidents are lack of trust of people and citizens to report hate crimes to law enforcement agencies, lack of coordination among the law enforcement agencies, and lack of utilization of the prevention mechanism in community policing, because the focus is more on the intervention rather than the prevention pillar. Some solutions and recommendations that we thought might be utilized. Number one, increase the communication between law enforcement agencies and the community, including key actors in the society, such as community groups, civil society sector, religious organizations, immigrant rights associations and organizations that support Black communities in Boston, schools, whether it's elementary, middle, and high schools, both public and private ones, and higher education universities, both public and private ones. Also, most importantly, is to enhance the collaboration between the Massachusetts Peace Officer Standards and Training Commission, the newly established one, POST, and the Office of Police Accountability and Transparency, OPAT, that is an internal oversight mechanism of the work of the police in the city of Boston, in readjusting the intervention component of modern policing into prevention, into focusing more on the prevention pillar, because in my opinion, community policing, modern policing as it was reestablished in American law enforcement in the 1960s and 1970s, what was initially applicable back in that time does not necessarily mean that it's applicable nowadays when it comes to public safety. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm Karina, and I'm a research associate at MOPC and an analyst for CWOP. Today, I'll briefly go over some data that we found on the cost of inaction on domestic terror using the Boston Marathon bombings and the Buffalo Shooting as examples. So the Boston Marathon bombings inflicted millions in damage to the local economy, according to preliminary estimates. Based on published reports and interviews with local businesses and authorities, here are some figures that hint at the ultimate financial impact of the bombings. So for example, one rough calculation estimated that the cost of artificial legs for the 14 people who lost limbs could exceed around $9 million. Similarly, One Fund Boston, established by the Surrey and state to aid marathon victims, collected around $23 million. Total business losses within the Boston Police Department's designated impact zone was $10 million. Additionally, the Commonwealth used emergency federal law enforcement assistance program funds, around $2 million, for the response to an investigation of the bombings. Similarly, the U.S. Department of Justice's Office for Victims of Crime announced an $8 million grant to organizations to provide direct support to assist the victims, witnesses, and first responders involved in the events surrounding the bombings. So for the Buffalo Shooting, shortly after this incident, Mayor Byron Brown testified at a House Financial Services Subcommittee hearing on the short and long-term economic impacts of mass shootings on local communities. In this hearing, Mayor Brown shared that in just 2 weeks after the incident, Surrey departments, police, fire, sanitation, and others spent over $500,000 of unbudgeted dollars on overtime and other related services. That amount has continued to significantly increase as Surrey government continues to play a crucial role in the community's healing process and public safety needs. These costs tend to start at the scene of the shooting for things like emergency medical care or police investigation, and continues on to the long-term healthcare and criminal justice costs. So both of these events reveal the high cost of inaction when it comes to addressing hate crime. Thank you.
Thank you, Reem. So the key point is, if you recognize the Boston Marathon bombing as a terrorist attack and not the Buffalo shooting, then we have a problem. And we are really struggling to get on the same page about domestic terrorism as a problem. This is domestic terrorism. This is not vandalism. These are acts of terrorism. And they will cost city government, they will cost state government, federal government, and the sort of the canary in the coal mine is essentially the hate crimes and the hate group activities. So for example, some of these groups that we mentioned, the Patriot Front has grown 70% over the last 2 years. They're all over Massachusetts. I was looking at some of the data in Pennsylvania. And then NSC 131, which is a homegrown terrorist organization. We also have a left-wing anarchist group called Jane's Revenge that's targeting abortion assistance centers. And that is also being termed vandalism, but in some cases they're firebombing these pregnancy assistance centers, and that could also lead to death, people getting injured, etc. So let's call it what it is. These are precursors of terrorism, terrorist activities, or terrorist groups. We have already seen how the hate groups are linked with planned acts of terrorism. We have seen individuals actually carrying out these activities using the ideologies that we mentioned. So we are also concerned that here in Massachusetts, we are not really calling much attention to this problem, and especially at the government level and the city level as well. And the civil society is also not really focused enough on the growing threat. Now, as all roads lead to Rome, all roads in Massachusetts that these groups have taken have actually led to Boston. We also mentioned in our presentation about the St. Patrick's Day event where NSC 131 converged in the city of Boston. We also mentioned the Patriot Front harassing that Black composer, hundreds of them marching on July 4th. This has been going on for several years now. So all roads lead to Boston, and this is something that Boston cannot ignore. And we've seen some discouraging responses from city government as well, saying we were unaware of this threat, etc., when actually they had marched in the city prior to that as well. So that's a problem. So, and the other thing is the government response is primarily through law enforcement. There's really no civil society mechanism to this, no preventative mechanism that is built in. And therefore, we feel that the Human Rights Commission has an increasingly pivotal role in convening some sort of a group or some sort of set of actions to try and monitor this threat, to bring the civil society actors together, the law enforcement actors together, academic community, the researchers like us, into calling attention to this problem and putting together a plan for prevention, not just monitoring, but prevention and building strategies in the city of Boston. And we've also heard that data on hate crimes in Boston is incomplete, as with many other cities. We are also concerned that a number of these hate crimes and events do not get reported, and the formal reporting mechanism through the FBI has also broken down. And at the same time, we are seeing stabbing incidents, all kinds of events in the city for the last several years at least, and those events are increasing day by day. So an agency in the city of Boston, is required, like the Human Rights Commission, with a holistic view of this hateful violence, how it translates into political violence and domestic terrorism. And we believe that the Human Rights Commission can fill this gap by implementing, at least a modest set of best practices already at work in other human rights groups and cities across the US. Some of this includes putting together bills, monitoring mechanisms, all kinds of reporting tools of hate crimes, etc. And we are willing to partner with the Human Rights Commission in developing some of these tools, analyzing data, whatever we can do as the University of Massachusetts, Boston, given the tools and the resources we have in hand. And obviously there's the question of having mandatory reporting of hate crimes. And if we put all these things together, we feel that the city of Boston and the Human Rights Commission and whatever we manage to convene could actually be an example to other cities. So this could be an exciting pilot project for other cities to emulate. We've already seen how San Francisco and a few other cities are warming up to these ideas, but a lot more needs to be done. And we want to sort of officially recommend some of these actions to you, and are willing to work with you, partner with you, whatever that is needed at our end to make this happen. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, every single one of you. I'm gonna open the floor first to the commissioners and commission staff for questions and comments, and then we can go to the public. Go ahead, just raise your hand and start talking, please. Commissioners, interns, executive director, Commissioner Russo.
So, I think the data is key, and that would be mandatory reporting. And I just don't know how you go about making it be mandatory and what power we have to enable that to happen. Would it be through our work with Boston City Council? I'm just wondering about the mechanisms of making that happen.
Mats, you want to answer that?
Yes, short of mandatory, I mean, that's a larger conversation, but this is something that we feel is the need, and the feasibility of that, obviously, we will need to examine. However, slightly short of that, a lot of this has to do with trust or lack thereof in reporting hate crimes, and sort of a civil society-based mechanism that is lacking, where people can, report things that they would not feel comfortable reporting. But I think the mandatory reporting aspect is certainly becoming more and more obvious because of missing data. And when you don't have enough reports coming in, you don't really have an accurate picture of what's really going on. So whether it's at the state level or at the city level, something has to be done. There has to be a way for us to compel agencies, maybe get into data sharing agreements, whatever it is, to try and collect this data, analyze this data, and make public decisions, public policy decisions, have rules and regulations to prevent this, including bills, perhaps, that specifically ban certain acts of hate, because I don't think that there is enough information out there, for people to feel that this is an urgent crisis. And part of it is because of a lack of data, especially when you have agencies, federal agencies like the FBI, and their hate crimes reporting data also kind of not working at this point, especially at this critical juncture. That data has become unreliable.
I have three hands. First, Commissioner Lee, then Commissioner Paredes, next, Talia Viveros. Commissioner Lee.
Oh, thank you. That was a great presentation. I appreciate it. I just was thinking, being a longstanding Bostonian African-American male, that Boston has not been really looked at as a liberal city. It's been looked at as a city that wasn't friendly to people of color. So therefore, it becomes a hotbed of people in these different types of groups that are outside of Boston, i.e. in Connecticut, Pennsylvania, and now come and feed off of the perception of Boston to elevate these hate crimes. Did you look at also the transition of people moving from, because of economic issues, moving from towns, communities in Boston that were historically hate crime, racist. A lot of those folks have moved to towns like Braintree, Weymouth, surrounding areas of Boston, where they start to see an uptick of hate crimes. And I would mention Quincy also. And I say that because of economic issues. South Boston was a place that was, predominantly Irish, and Southtown, East Boston. Now, because of economic issues, where a triple decker goes for $1.5 million or whatever, people have those same groups of people, I'm not going to cast all shadow on all of them, but groups of people have now moved to other places, but yet they will come into Boston and have an outburst at a Celtics game, or have an outburst at a football game, which, you know, really really continues that thought that people have of Boston as not being a friendly place, and a hotbed of hate for people of color. Have you looked at any of that, those type of dynamics? And I know that because I work with the Department of Justice on a lot of this stuff in the past year I used to work with the Department of Public Health. I was just curious, did you look at any of those factors as you were doing your research?
Yes, we did, and we find a very strong correlation between the more diverse counties and neighborhoods and the increase in hate crimes and hate group activities. These are two distinct things: hate groups, the presence of hate groups, hate crimes, but they're interrelated. And there is a correlation between where these groups are doing the activities and the diversity in those cities and towns. And you made another point, which is reflected in the data, is that we are also seeing surrounding cities and towns like Brockton, like Taunton, very recently, Patriot Front, NSC 131 in particular, had a major demonstration outside the Taunton Public Library against a drag event. So they're also targeting not just minorities, ethnic, racial minorities, but also religious and sexual minorities, if you want to call it that, really going after these groups. And obviously the threatening calls that the Boston Children's Hospital is getting, not to forget that, about gender conversion, all of these conspiracy theories. But the problem is, as we've seen again and again, we have a gun problem in this country and a problem with mass shootings. We have also have a problem with online radicalization, and we have seen how individuals in these groups take matters to their hands. So whether you want to call it lone wolf attacks or etc. We are just witnessing the trial in Buffalo. So the threat of ignoring this is huge. So it applies to any city, any demographic, any group really that is under threat, in that list of categories of people. But the city of Boston is really, like I said, a lot of these groups really want to be seen in the city of Boston as being involved in certain things, protest demonstrations, etc., and where people gather. So I think the city of Boston can be an example on how to bring the rest of the civil society, because a lot of church groups, synagogues, interfaith groups, there are lots of groups who are actually doing, stuff in a disjointed way against this, and the police, obviously. But there has to be sort of a comprehensive strategy to tackling this bottom up.
So, real quick question. I'm sorry, Chairwoman. Another quick question on that point, because I think this is important, because we are very attractive at looking for extremist groups. City of Boston right now, well, it has been because the history of racism in Boston. So therefore, they want to capitalize on that image, coming here and establishing themselves. And so I look at it as a two-pronged opportunity for the commission, of course, and the city of Boston. First, to stabilize the perception of Boston being a racist city, but on the flip side of that, of not being welcoming to extremist groups coming in from other entities and establishing themselves here, which actually has been the first time, probably in, I don't know, past 15 years, where you're starting to see, as you mentioned, starting to see an increase because of the attraction of the historic nature of Boston when you talk about hate crimes and racism.
Absolutely, and we do see certain parallels between Boston and Portland, for example. Underlying segregation, racism, etc., and how that city is also has had a lot of hate crimes, groups moving, from various, paths from outside the city into the city. especially during elections, what were called these Trump convoys as well, tactically armed groups. So we are not seeing it to that extent in Boston yet, but it definitely is a possibility.
Thank you.
Okay, I have to move on. We are short of time and we still have, so Commissioner Paredes and then Talia.
Yeah, thank you. Well, thank you so much for the presentation. So I'll say a couple of comments and questions, and I think even if there's no time to answer them now, I think maybe something to like circle back on, as you continue doing this work. But one, I just wanted to say that it feels like this pairs really well with the presentation that we had previously from, Lilo and Talia, and so I feel like there's definitely some work, an overlap there in terms of building out what this could potentially look like in terms of like a response. Just a couple of notes here. I think one thing that also sticks out to me from noticing these sort of like hate crimes and events around the country is one, the racial issue, but one, it seems, unless I'm, incorrect, I don't have numbers, but that it's predominantly a male issue as well, and that there's, a gender issue here as well. And so, wondering what sort of thought or conversations are around that as well. So just, that's just kind of more of a general comment. Also, one thing I'm wondering is, do we know, or does law enforcement, does anyone know who these people are? Are they from, there's been, a lot of use of, for example, gang databases against brown and black communities, wondering if there's something similar happening with these sort of, groups. And do we know who these people are? Are they working in public spaces? Are they from certain, neighborhoods? Do we have some sort of sense of where some of this is starting to to come up from, and bubble up from certain communities or areas? And so that's, I guess, one general question. And then I'll throw one more out there, and whatever lands and sticks and you want to respond to, happy to hear, is, I think getting in terms of brainstorming prevention strategies, I think that's always like a complicated question, because it's, I'm glad that it was brought up of thinking of prevention, and thinking of prevention not only in the sense of how do we add more crime laws to the books, right? Because I think there's a lot of, mixed results on what that does or doesn't accomplish. But wondering if there's already been some best practices that we've seen in other communities that are starting to form around, some of that. So thank you so much again.
Great questions. The demographic it's fascinating. One small caveat I would like to introduce is that when we look at the 1,500 profiles that terrorism expert Robert Pape did at the University of Chicago of the January 6th attackers, what we found was that they were predominantly white, middle class, affluent, people who 90% of whom were unaffiliated to any of these groups that we're talking about, Patriot Front, NSC, none of these. Some of them even flew there, in private jets. So they actually came from purple or blue states. So this idea that they come from some sort of red state, particular demographic is doesn't really match. And these people, for whatever reason they came, they ended up attacking our government. So it's that dangerous. This particular demographic that we're talking about, I'll ask Jack also to talk a little more about that. But if you look at the some of these individuals who launched these attacks, if you want to call to attention these lone wolf type of attackers, the Buffalo shooter, for example, these are young white males. Some of them in their teens, late teens, 19, 20, 17, early 20s. They are, if you look at the ideological side of things, the literature that they put together, what they have said online, it aligns with several things. One thing is the replacement theory, this fear that that particular demographic is losing power, that they're being replaced by everybody else. And then there's another theory called accelerationism, which is kind of sort of bringing down the order of things so that there's a new order based on race. So there are these sort of driving forces, but this particular demographic needs help, and it's in these bubbles. A lot of it is in the digital bubble, but we need to focus on structural prevention, longer term prevention, which means tackling this particular demographic, their fears, their concerns, whatever that they're going through as well. If you're going to address this in the longer term, because that's who is taking the guns and carrying out some of these actions. So they have certain issues themselves. So the demographic aspect of it is fascinating. Again, going back to the Buffalo shooter, he drove 200 miles to the Tops Market. That neighborhood is 80-90% black, and he came from an area which was 80-90% white. So he had to drive all the way there to prove a point by killing all these people. So that's why I mean, being and the point that the other gentleman commissioner raised is are we an attraction? Is Boston an attraction to some of these people? And as we saw in Buffalo and other places too, the synagogue attack, California has had several. We could actually be a huge sort of attraction for people to come and do this type of attack.
Talia.
Thank you all. I'll keep it quick because we ran out of time, but I'd like to thank you all for this relevant work. You stress out the importance of prevention, and at times I felt that you also emphasize monitoring hate crimes, but I wonder whether you could please elaborate on the importance of also focusing on hate events, because you saw a correlation between events and then the occurrence of crimes. And if that is important, then how you make the distinction conceptually between one and the other, and how the commission could then help in identifying both of them. Thank you.
Another great point. Thank you for that. We've been doing events data analysis, which is a specific area in early warning, and you're exactly right. And Mahdi actually mentioned this in his presentation. For example, when we looked at a particular data set, and I'll use the Portland data set, for example, events like vandalism, people don't really pay much attention to that. Graffiti, whatever you want to call it, the drawing of a swastika, right? People don't really consider that a crime. However, when you have enough saturation of those events, we also noticed, violent demonstrations, violent protests, groups moving in with, that were tactically armed, assaults, all kinds of actual physical attacks, or threatening postures, threatening movement, etc., that could have actually led to bloodshed. And as we have seen, in the sort of northwestern region, those things have erupted. We saw what Kyle Rittenhouse did, that young teenager. So as you have a buildup of these incidents, these hate events, the hate crimes is soon to follow, and with that will come acts of terrorism, or at least it'll intensify the threat of these terror attacks. And I think it's important to kind of keep that correlation in mind. If you don't nip it in the bud, if you don't do the upstream prevention or even the midstream prevention, you're going to actually have a mess, which is why we kind of wanted to present the cost of ignoring this, because downstream it becomes way more complex, way more expensive as well.
There is also a question from the public. Ms. Catherine Vitali.
One second, I'll promote.
Thank you.
Just 1 second. Catherine, you should be able to unmute yourself. Oh, there you go.
Hi, I was just wondering if and when the Human Rights Commission meetings are going to be held in person.
That is something we're looking to discuss at the next commission meeting for, but when we do, on our website, we'll be posting where they are located, well ahead of time. But
Yeah, I just feel like I accidentally stumbled upon it looking for city council hearings, and I feel like nobody knows about it.
Yeah, so we are looking to do more of our outreach now that we have an education outreach coordinator. And more meeting people where they are, so doing our commission meetings in different neighborhoods. But if you want, you can send me your email or just check our website, because I will be posting our meetings there with the agenda and the topic.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Vitale. So I'm gonna close. We are a little bit out of time, but I'm gonna close with a question for the group. What do you think that which is echoing what Commissioner Rousseau asked at the beginning? What do you think the Boston Human Rights Commission could do in the short term? Matt.
Oh, I didn't know if it was, sorry. I think one of the things to do, at least in the shorter term, is to look at some of the sort of best practices of what some of the other cities and cities are doing. And, you know, we can actually put some information together for you, which, you know, we've also looked at, you know, sort of hate crimes reporting, you know, apps, you know, various other tools as well. But I think some of the things we're seeing is various groups being brought together, convened by human rights commissions, city town officials, US attorneys, etc. And that includes religious communities, all kinds of groups, and you know, sort of calling attention to the problem. That's sort of one of the things, you know, I don't want to call it low-hanging fruit because it's a very important step. Two, putting together sort of bills, you know, there was one in Florida, various other places. Another recent example is in San Francisco, you know, where they're actually organizing forums. In New Hampshire, there's a movement going on now led by various state and local officials at the city level as well to convene these groups. So it's a recognition of the fact that yes, the Boston Human Rights Commission alone cannot tackle this, but it's a recognition that this problem is shared and that we need to find a convener, which in our mind could be the Boston Human Rights Commission, to convene various other groups and paying attention to the groups that are silent or have no voice in this. You know, so it can't just be a law enforcement approach, can't just be a public official approach. It has to be many different other groups that are brought in, and I think that this is the right platform. That you are the right platform for convening at least some of those conversations, asking those open-ended questions. You know, what do we do about this? Who's willing to participate in this? What are you willing to share? What can you bring to the table? You know, how do we collaborate? How do we, you know, cross different boundaries, organizational boundaries, legislative, you know, other boundaries to address the problem and come up with creative solutions that, you know, none of us can achieve on our own. So I think that to me is at least a starting point for the Boston Human Rights Commission, and that would actually provide a shining example to other smaller cities and towns in the region, and the leadership, you know, and UMass Boston, like I said, you know, since we're also in the city, this is our own backyard. Although we are doing this nationally, we too are committed to providing whatever support we can. So we have some ideas on how to collect some of this data, etc. But I think it's creating that platform and creating that level of trust that the Human Rights Commission is taking some sort of a leadership Doesn't mean that you have to lead from the front. You can lead from the middle. You can find other sort of leaders who are willing to take different responsibilities. Law enforcement, religious communities, academic groups, whatever. But I think you need a leader that leads from the middle and understands the different socio-economic, political, various of the dimensions of the problem, and not be kind of limited to one set of tools, one set of approaches. And we firmly believe that this is the right mechanism to at least convene that conversation.
Thank you very much. In a way, we were unaware of your work, but in a way, the commission itself had started that same process and had already decided to devote this year to look into the problem of hate in Boston. And in a presentation we had in December, we discussed the possibility of establishing partnerships with community organizations and agencies to look into this beyond City Hall, beyond the Human Rights Commission. So I thank you. It is, as Commissioner Paredes said, it really fits in what our discussion and process was these past few months. I see Ms. Severino, you had a hand up.
Sorry, that was a mistake.
Oh, okay. I'm like super quick at that. Oh, okay, Commissioner Lee.
No, I'm just going to say, my wife, you hit the nail on the head, and I appreciate everything you said, because I think you're exactly right. As the Human Rights Commission, we can make, as John Lewis would say, some really good trouble of pushing any and all hate, racism to the forefront and making that noise and building coalitions and not, I love how you said we can do it in the middle. We don't have to be in the front. And it just really resonated with me as you said those words, because it becomes really, really important. Because a lot of these hate crimes that happen, people, they get so numb to it that they don't report it. And when these microaggressions and all these different things are happening, they just accept it of being in part of the region. And I think I was just getting excited when you were saying that, because I was like, oh my God, he's exactly right. Because we can start to put our finger on the pulse of something that's right here, right now, and being able to build those coalitions and partnerships becomes such a crucial piece. And I appreciate the offer of working with UMass around this, man, because I think we can, I'm not saying we can solve the problem, but we damn sure can make sure it's heard. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We'll be honored to work with you all. Thank you.
Thank you so very much to all of you. I look forward to continuing this conversation with the researchers and with my colleagues and with the staff of the commission and with the graduate students, researchers that, Robert, do you want to say anything? Okay. Sorry, I called you Robert. Okay, so I need a motion to adjourn.
I'll make said motion.
Second.
Thank you very much, everybody. Anybody in favor? Raise your hands. Okay, right. So it's unanimous. I am gonna close. The meeting is adjourned at 6:17. With my gratitude and that of the commission for every single one of you. You will hear from us. And if you have any comments or anything to say about this meeting today and any thoughts, please send them to me or to Executive Director Helmy, and we'll move rapidly to answer anything or to respond to any opportunity of collaboration, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Thank you very much. And see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Stay safe, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Good night. Bye.